Namaste and welcome to this exciting episode of Sattology, debunking mythology. Sattology means science of truth, the study of truth. Opposite of that is mythology or mythology, whichever way you pronounce, means science or study of fake, lie, or imagination. The word mythology was especially coined to prove that the native cultures like Hindus and Buddhists and other cultures have no spiritual basis. And it was done by the European scholars. And therefore, please don't use the word mythology for any Vedic literature, including Vedic Itihas, like Ramayana and Mahabharata. Whereas you can use the word mythology for everything else because archaeologically, astronomically, and various other proofs are not there for any of those cultures. So I have a very, very special guest, and he's a very highly decorated Navy veteran of India. And without delay, you can find him on TV shows and multiple channels everywhere in India. So let us welcome retired Admiral Shekhar Sinha. Welcome, sir. And first of all, before I do that, welcome to USA.
Thank you, Adi.
And we have also invited him to our Lit Fest in San Diego. So please do join and meet him in person. It will be a rare honor for everyone. And recently, the Indian Navy ships have been coming to US in large numbers. We had 2 or 3 visits last year, and it's growing friendship between American and Indian navies. At the same time, it's a growing rivalry also as the US Indian Navy becomes bigger. So, one question to you, sir: what is the future of the Indian Navy you see from your perspective?
Well, firstly, thank you very much for inviting me for this Zoom discussion. I appreciate and for the generous introduction that you have made. And let me just, before I talk about Indian Navy, let me congratulate you for coining this word, Sattology, because what was considered as a myth or a mythology, then the word given by the Western sort of really the colonial parts, all the excavations which have taken place in the last 10, 15 years, they have all located the places which are mentioned in our epics, particularly Ramayana and Mahabharata. There is hardly any doubt that we have the evidence, physical evidence of 5,000 years old history. And the Prime Minister Modi has recently announced that there will be a museum on our Sattology, if I may use your word, in Delhi, which is spread over a very huge area of some 9,500 acres of land. And it will display the pictures, and in some cases, it will take you to those on a video link to see those places which are mentioned in these holy books. So there's nothing fictitious, there's no fiction about it. It is all reality, it's all truth. So having said that, let me come back to your question, Adi. You made mention as to how do you see Indian Navy growing and heading in which direction. Well, I would say that not my assessment, but people who do the assessment, the organizations like CIPRI, IISS, they do the naval power and the state power study every year, and they come out in a publication. The Indian Navy has been put at maybe the 4th most strong navy in the world, behind US, China, the French Navy, and thereafter the Indian Navy. So I think they may be quite right, having served in the Navy for nearly 42 years. I see that Navy will be a great enabler of peace and progress in the Indo-Pacific and specifically in the Indian Ocean region, because if you see the map of the globe, half the globe, if you like, the Indian Peninsula actually juts out into the Indian Ocean like a long thumb, maybe like a dagger. It is the biggest or largest and most proficient country in that area, in the Indian Ocean littoral, and every country, big or small, they look up to India for providing that security, for maintaining peace and stability. which will improve, which will increase the trade and commerce, so essential for the prosperity of people. So I think that Navy is really harbinger of peace, not really war, and for making sure that there is no war at sea, one has to be very, very, very strong. And in that sense, our partnership with the United States Navy is not new. It goes back to 1993. I remember the first time that I exercised with the US Navy. It was a bilateral exercise called Malabar, but more of it a little later. Adi.
Amazing opening lines. And I think, which is, I really find that the American sailors or American Navy officers never take Indian Navy's name as an enemy. I've met so many of them. I live in a Navy town, and it's known for naval assets and naval preparations. And I've always seen a very friendly attitude of American naval officers towards India, and sometimes also condescending also. Like, for example, until the last visit of the Indian Navy ship, the generally, and I know many Indian Americans who are captains, one or two ships, DDG 69, USS Milius, they were, and I met the staff, and many, you'll be shocked to know, many American Sanatan Dharma followers are working in the Los Angeles class submarines also. I know many of them who are wonderful individuals, and they practice while on the boat also under the ocean for a long duration of time when they go on the Los Angeles class nuclear submarines. So why this kind of friendliness by the Navy sailors and officers towards India? What is India does that they are so assured that India is a friend?
Well, very, very important question and a very relevant one as to when I meet the Chinese officers or Chinese people or Chinese naval people, they always say that, you are sort of inclining towards the US and your association with US Navy seems to be much stronger. I always say that, it's a very natural for not only as a Navy, but as two countries. If you remember, Mr. Atal Bihari Vajpayee, who was our prime minister, during his visit to US, he said that America and India are very natural partners. And why did he say it? If you look at India, India is very unique in the sense that people are very independent minded, just like an American. American people, love their liberty, and so do the Indians. So that is number one. The second thing is, we are a very thriving democracy, and US is the oldest democracy in the world, and India is the largest democracy. We have, not something to be very proud, but we have just become the most populous country in the world. Well, it has its own benefits, and there are negatives as well. But having said that, let me come back to what you asked. I think there are two important things: is that in democracies, people think alike, uh, and whatever they think, they express it in the same manner. And therefore, you will find that statements coming out of Indian diplomats or Indian armed forces officer will be absolutely blunt, and they will be spot on. They don't mince their word. So Americans like this, and the American Navy officers and sailors, when they interact with the Indian Navy sailors and officers, they have a very similar view. That's number one. The second thing is professional. Professionally, the Indian Navy is I would say very proficient, very, very proficient Navy. Our training systems are excellent, very foolproof. We train people from 25, 30 countries at various levels, starting from sailors to right from the officers and highest level of exchange. So these are professional issues, or professional competence has been judged by the US Navy since 1993, which I made a mention of. Because prior to that, during the Cold War period, the US as a country always thought that India is in a Soviet camp and it's a Eastern sort of country, and that was a misnomer. Because with the Russians, we only have a buyer-seller relationship. It wasn't the relationship of any ideology. Ideology wise, we are very much democratic country. You see the elections which take place. It's a very vibrant democracy. Politics, and therefore the mindset of the Indian Navy officers and sailors who are a product of that society. Obviously, that too is very free mind. That too is a mind where people are they can express themselves. And the from 93 onwards, after the fall of the Soviet Empire, the US thought that let us actually see where is the Indian Navy. We have been saying that it is, Russian oriented. So let us go and see it. And in 93, not as two countries, it is between two navies that the exercise Malabar began. And I'm very happy to say that I was commanding a ship at that time, and one of the participants in that exercise. And then they realized that, come on, here they speak the same language. They follow the same tactical procedures. And they are so easy to interact, unlike many other countries with whom the US Navy had relation. And they saw that we are just like any other English speaking, maybe, European navies. In fact, in many areas, we were more proficient. Uh, because we have two sort of nuclear power as our adversaries on our borders, and we are 24/7 in a sort of hot situation, if you like. So I think the American Navy realized that, and from then onwards we have exercised Malabar virtually every year. And as you know, that now it is a multilateral fora, and it has become a very not declared but undeclared component of the Quad that we have. So I think it's both professional and our democratic, shall I say, form of our governance. The countries are free. The countries are interacting with each other much more. So I think the U.S. Navy has, and so do we. We have a great respect for the U.S. Navy. It's the most powerful navy in the world. There is not a doubt. A lot of exchanges, and now with Lemoa and Comcasa and these kind of agreements having been signed, the interaction between two countries is much more. It's on a scale of 100, I would say, is nearly 90. Other than that, India is not part of NATO. There is no difference between the interaction levels of these two countries.
One question generally comes in, like usually, that Americans have fought or created wars everywhere. And this is a question in many Americans' mind also. They all know the fact that we have created so many wars all over the world. Sorry. And the after effects of the wars have to be cleaned by somebody else. This is a general sailor's view. It's not that, we meet in the coffee shop and we discuss these things. And it's a Navy town, San Diego. So we have many friends here, common friends. So generally they say that the Americans create wars and then the other navies are cleaning up. And generally one joke is the Indian Navy is the best one to clean up. Like they're talking about Africa. They're the best one to clean up in Africa and other places. And so, and also Indian Navy had a very unique record, and there is an American base, Diego Garcia, right there, and the Chagos Archipelago. And American Navy ships have been known to come to Indian ports to fill up for gas and food supplies and other things. And so naturally they like the curry. So many of the ships, CENTCOM ships, they have curry as one of the dishes being made on the ships also, because that they imported from India. So masalas have reached to American ships also. So the question is that, is Indian Navy a cleanup thing after the American mishaps?
I don't look at it that way. United States is a global power, and therefore it looks at the world in a different perspective than what India as a country looks at. India's challenges, prospects are more regional because of its economy, because of its military power and economic power, and therefore we will always have many divergent views, like we have right now in the Ukraine conflict. But having said that, as far as the oceans are concerned, Adi, on the oceanic side, we have complete convergence of thought process, of principles, of objectives. You hear this quite often: free and open sea, and you also had, we are going to be making sure that there is no obstruction in trade and commerce, not only for our own countries but for all countries. As we call it in the Navy, is called the global commons. So global commons means that the unimpeded trade by anybody in the world, because the sea belongs to everybody. Sea is not owned. The sea does not have borders. And therefore, it is important to understand that the navies and the naval officers will behave in a very different manner. And their perception of the world will be very different than what an army and air force guy will be, because they often work in sectors and geographical limits, and maybe the land borders, which the Navy doesn't, because it doesn't have a border. So, as a result, what has happened is that Indian Navy has been present virtually in all the littorals of the Indian Ocean region. And Africa happens to be in our littoral. And when we say that maritime security, Indian Navy has been a preferred partner of most of the navies or most of the countries in the Indian Ocean littoral, and a very large number of those countries. And it starts from the east coast of Africa, and it goes right up to Malacca Strait and Lombok Strait. And in the south, it goes up to maybe 20 degrees south of equator. All those countries are very much dependent, and they want the Indian Navy to be present, and rightly so, because it's as I said, in this part of the world, it is the strongest navy, and the country is democratic, and people are very friendly, and we don't have any adversary. We don't create adversaries. The only two known adversaries at the moment are on the land border. There's nobody on sea who's our adversary, though we in 71 and 65 we did have problem with our western neighbor. So I think that because of our presence and our attitude to help another country, we always do that. It doesn't matter who has created a mess or who has created a war. But as a shall I say, as a nation with such glorious history of kindness, of friendship, and Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam, as our Prime Minister Modi keeps saying these days very often. In fact, we practice that. It is so easy to get along with an Indian, and it is so easy to open your heart, and they will open their heart very quickly. So I think it is more to do with the nature of the human being, the nature of people in India, which is really linked to cytology, if I may call that word, use that word. And therefore, the Indian Navy officers are no different. The sailors are no different. When we go, we don't see who's created the mess. It doesn't matter. We want to see how can we help to rebuild that country? How can we help to make them more strong, make them more capable, so that they can look after their security interest on their own. They don't have to call us. So that is always the intention with any country with whom we have, good equation, or any country we have a good bilateral relation, which we have with most of the countries, really. Adi.
You know, Indian Navy's new emblem has Shivaji Maharaj on it, which is Shivaji Maharaj's naval symbol. And also in 1741, Marthanda Varma, the king of India, south in Kerala, Travancore. Today Travancore is divided into 4 or 5 states in South India. But Travancore, Marthanda Varma defeated Spanish, Portuguese, Dutch, and English navies in one single fight. No, that is the first record of winning the fight, and before that, Shivaji Maharaj also. So India had a strong defensive credentials in Indian Navy, and also if you look at Ramayana Mahabharata history, you see right from the Vanaras of Bhagwan Ram's army going with the sea, and they had an accurate idea about the whole world, which island, including all the islands, were mapped. So in the course of time, like we see today, that in this Kali Yuga, and we see the US Navy and other navies doing, most of the attacks on India have happened through Navy. And the world is aware of that. India has a very defensive posture, strong defensive posture. So in the future, we have seen that entire colonial propaganda came through the sea, whether it's a Dutch East India Company or East India Company, British East India Company, or any other company, came through the sea. And many parts of which were connected to India, like Philippines and other things, were very closely mentioned in Indian scriptures, that how they were part of extended India, right from Kyrgyzstan to Cambodia to even to the Middle East. So far, they say nowadays Africa, the Horn of Africa also. So if you look at that history and today's history, that how much Indian Navy is strongly poised to defend its interests today as a blue water navy. Literally, it's a blue water navy now with two aircraft carriers.
Well, Adi, it's a great question that you have asked, really, and I would be answering this question of yours in a very deliberate manner and very frank and candid. If you see the history, if you go back to the history prior to Mughals, you are right that India had a fair amount of sea power, but India as a country was not in this form. India was actually an assembly of very large number of princely states, and some of it you mentioned, and they all had their own little so-called navy, really the pirate ships, if you like, and they used to make sure that their trade is not disturbed. I'm talking about even the pre-European. So we are looking at a period when the trade by the locally manufactured, built boats in what they call dhows now. On the eastern side, we had trade right up to Indonesia and some of it to China. There are some provinces in China where excavation has shown that the Indians were very frequent visitors, including some Shiva temple. Similarly, on the western side, the Gulf countries, the African countries, we had a very thriving seaborne trade. But the sea was very bad, very rough. Monsoon, as known as a bad weather bringer, and therefore the ships would not traverse those long distances in monsoons. Having said that, the Britishers actually, or the European powers, were the first ones who attempted to come to India and capture certain parts. The reason was that when the Mughals came into India, particularly the first one, the starting with the Babur's time, as you know that he was an Uzbek, and it happened from the side of the Himalayas and from the corridor which is surrounded by 4 or 5 hill ranges, and they invaded, and because they knew that India is not one collective country. India has got very large number of these small princely states, and they are not very friendly to each other. So they took advantage of this division and divisive nature of these princely states. They bribed some, they attacked some, and therefore, when you see the period of Mughal Empire, subsequently, initially they came in the northern part of India and they established themselves because the countries, the small princely states, were not friendly. But that had a very adverse impact because they ruled for about 500 years, nearly 500 years. Now, in this 500 years, the entire orientation of the Indian people was to the north, because the number of invasions which took place, they all took place from that part of the world, because those people were quite warriors. You see Genghis Khan, you see Muhammad Ghori, all of them came through that route. And ultimately, there was a Mughal Empire. So the Indian polity which existed at that time, the kings and princes, they never bothered too much about what is happening overseas. Whereas in the southern peninsula, we have had these independent states, and some of them that you mentioned, they ran their own trade, and the Mughals did not have much control on those states. So India was virtually sort of, into small. India was seen as a small pieces, and the trade from Kalinga, the trade from the Cholas, the trade from these nations were quite advanced. Their navies were very advanced, and to protect their trade, they had to have some kind of armed boats and armed house, what we call the pirate ships in those days. So when the British came in the period of Mughal, the attention of India as a country towards sea, uh, it became less and less. They had a small sort of fighting force which would fight the forces of the Western India or the forces of the Southern India. But gradually, the attention of the entire Indian nation was focused on the land. That invasions take place from there, and therefore you should protect that area. You rightly said that we extended right up to the Central Asian Republic. In fact, the Bamiyan Buddha is a known thing that Buddhism had actually gone up to there, during the time of Ashoka. So there's a history. There's a history, and it is it is truth. But the Britishers took advantage of India or Indian government not paying attention towards their sea, not as a government. Whereas the southern states still had fair amount of attention on the sea, and the first place where the Britishers came to colonize was Calcutta. It is far removed from the southern Indian states, and we are looking at Calcutta. The East Indies Company came and established, and even till then, the Mughal empires did not pay much attention to the sea route. And during that period, when the Britishers finally the Mughals were sort of done away with, and the United Kingdom established a full-fledged government, and not India not being ruled by East Indies Company. So we are looking at a time frame when the advantage was taken by the Europeans, particularly the British, of the Indian polity's attention more on land. And during their tenure of 250 years, Adi, they continued to fill up their minds that the land border is where your threats are, not the sea. And the sea power was not allowed to develop. So this is one of the reasons why we did not have very robust, shall I say, the navy, and which we have built up. We realized the moment we got independent, we realized that, in fact, our own politicians were very reluctant to make a big navy. But I must give hats off to our predecessors in the navy who could think big, who could see India as an Indian Ocean power, extending from eastern coast of Africa to Malacca Strait, as I mentioned. And they built a navy which could take care of India's trade, commerce, and energy interest in this entire area. And that is why today India is the Indian Navy is the fourth sort of strongest and largest navy in the world. Adi.
So, Bajirao Peshwa II, during his time, India was the #1 shipbuilding destination in Asia. In Asia, not even, and I think probably bigger than any European country. And after we know after Aurangzeb died in 1707, and then Jahangir, the #4, used to trade from the Kolkata port, and Dutch East India Company was ruling. So technically, English rule on India was only for 90 years, 1857 to 1947, because 1857, the British Empire got involved. So this is the history. I mean, they may have come before illegally, but this is a history that the government rule was only between 1857 to 1947. And of which last 2 years and 3 years of the rule were marred by INA, and which also had some naval presence, not a lot, but some naval presence also. If you look at the history of India and the Britain and the America till 1971, and probably till early 80s, American forces literally thought of India as an enemy.
Yeah.
1991 is where the mood started changing. Yeah. And therefore, most of the Indian naval assets are considered like an enemy by the American strategic thinkers, not by the sailors.
Absolutely.
Because they think of Indian Navy as an extension of Russian Navy or Soviet Navy, which is not the case, because now we know that the Indian Navy is has a close cooperation. At the same time, it is building a capacity which is important to defend its own interests. Now, coming to the actual question on this one is that the how Indian Navy is prepared to not repeat the mistakes of the past.
Well, again, I think you have saved all the tough questions for me. So thank you very much for that. At least I, it tickles my brain and makes me open out. That's a very good question that we were such a leading country as far as shipbuilding is concerned. And we are not a leading country now. The biggest culprit, I would say, that during the Industrial Revolution, the British government did not permit the benefits or the knowledge of industrial revolution to come to India. So all our industries virtually remained, old and sort of outdated. You may have read that, the cotton used to be taken out from India to Lancashire, and it used to be, made into clothes and sold back in India. But the Britishers could not even transfer the simple technology of, converting the threads into a proper milled, shall I say, the clothes. So that was the kind of restriction that we had to recover from. And I must say that after 1947, the governments have realized that manufacturing will remain their nemesis, which it is now, even now. And that is why you will find that the realization of making the Navy strong has been always there since 1947. But, at the time of independence, India's most of the wealth were sort of removed from here and taken to United Kingdom. You will hear this very more and more often, that largest number of people died, because of starvation during British period. And it was all created by the government when they did not pay attention, the British government. So now we are recovering from that. The shipbuilding, we started very early, warship building particularly. In early 60s, we realized that, no country can become a powerful country by importing weapon systems. And therefore, we must start building our own stuff. So first thing that we attempted, the Navy, asked the government that we should have our own shipyards, government shipyards, and those shipyards should be headed by naval officers. And that rule still applies. If you see the Mazgaon Dock Limited, Goa Shipyard, or GRSC, all these, the government shipyards, are headed by a retired admiral or a serving admiral who's made to or requested to leave, and they select them to become the chairman, managing director. So that's a very big thing which has happened. Our first ship was a Leander class ship, which came out in the very early sort of late 60s, I would say. Nilgiri, INS Nilgiri. It was built in India by Mazgaon Dock Limited. And since then, we haven't looked back. Now we make state-of-the-art ships, including the aircraft carrier, which has just been produced. We make submarines. We made our own nuclear-powered nuclear weapon submarine, the Arihant. So, it has been a very focused approach, and Navy really pays a lot of attention. We always call ourselves, we are builders Navy. We are not purchasing Navy. We don't import ships anymore. So, and hopefully we will not import submarines as well. Even the last submarines which are being built here, they are built under license and being built in MDL. Nuclear submarines, we don't allow anybody to touch it. We make it absolutely ourselves, with the DRDO and the Navy combined. So I think that, we are much stronger today. We are making our own systems. Yes, some weapon systems are still imported because we are not self-reliance on that has not been achieved, but it is happening, as you can see with the Atmanirbhar Bharat, what Prime Minister Modi has coined this term. And every country, the technologically advanced countries, are now sort of being requested that, we will make together, but you have to make it in India. And that has, I think, gone down because the market is big. It's a growing economy. We are already about 3.7. I think by end of coming year we should be 5 trillion economy. By end of 25 we should be 5 trillion economy. As the economy becomes larger, and also our land forces, our air force are very strong. They have given solid rebuttal to our northern neighbor every time they have tried to expand and slice into our territory. The Western neighbor is all quiet now because we don't think they are any adversary, because they are absolutely down in the dumps by themselves. We don't have to do anything. But the another neighbor is very powerful. Is, I mean, world's second largest. In fact, is second largest, strongest navy at the moment. So we have that in mind, but we have a geographical advantage in the Indian Ocean, and everybody else is at disadvantage because we are right in the middle, and we have built a very strong navy with the support of government, particularly the present government. Prime Minister Modi, belongs to Gujarat, which is a maritime state, and therefore his understanding of sea power is, very, very, very firm. And therefore, you will find that everything that is happening in the maritime domain is all, I must say that it has got his approval. So it's not going to happen again the way it was. We are much stronger. Even, in fact, the US Navy is also acknowledged that we are strong, and that is why we have this partnership of Quad. Otherwise, they wouldn't have. America only understands the power, and it has realized that the naval power of India is quite strong.
So two alliances Americans made after COVID. One was Quad, another was AUKUS, Australia, UK, US, and Canada. So these two alliances were made. AUKUS was military, and Quad was non-military, was economic. And Chinese media has incorrectly portrayed it as a military alliance. It's not. India has made it very clear. India is not an ally of US. And they've corrected it in diplomatic communication also, that India is a partner of US, not ally, because ally is a subordinate position. So now, if you look at the colonial history, the colonial navies moved, and then the colonization happened. It was done at the barrel of the gun. That yes, Jahangir IV was very scared of Dutch East India Company. And viewers should know that Dutch East India Company is the largest company the world has ever seen. And in terms of economic power, and they controlled 39% of the world trade. That's how big they were. And Indonesia was colonized by them. And the Islam came because of that colonization. And before that, Indonesia was a Hindu country. Now, if you look at the history, so now the same old strategy is being used by the West. West means only 4 countries, which is USA, UK, Canada, and some Scandinavian countries. So generally US, UK, Canada, and Australia. That is the West. So it's unfortunate that Australia is on the southeast, and still it's called the West, but it's West because it's part of the alliance. So the Navy played a very important role. And we all talk about Chinese encirclement of India, but India is already encircled by the West. We have Diego Garcia, we have CENTCOM working there, we have naval assets all over the Indian Ocean, American naval assets, European naval assets, British naval assets, Spanish naval assets, Spanish Armada is there, Portuguese naval assets are there, but we don't highlight them. And only the Chinese naval assets are pointed out. But if you look at the colonization was done of the Asia, because Asia was the economic power at that time, and now also it's emerging as the largest consumer society in the world, the richest one after Europe. So the Europe is built on Asian money, and which is very clear. British owe, according to Shashi Tharoor and other people who have calculated, is $45 trillion.
Yeah.
Now is what the British owe. America was built by the Indian money. Very few people know. Yale University, the entire British loot was used in USA because USA was a colony of Britain. So in looking in this historical perspective, is Indian Navy prepared for this military encirclement of Indian economic interests?
Well, I would say that there is a very clear division as to what decisions are taken as far as our economic integration or tie-up is concerned. That's very, very political and very, more on diplomatic. But we know one thing, that the Indian Navy will protect India's economic interest wherever they may be in the world. For example, we are into oil exploration, in some parts of Vietnam, some parts in the Iranian oil field, and some of the Russian oil fields, we are involved. We have a Videsh foreign arm of the, what is called the ONGC. And we are helping also, countries in the African continent. And that is the charter of the Indian Navy, to protect the economic interests of our country. As and when directed, Indian Navy will be there. For example, when there was an objection by the Chinese on India's sort of exploration in the South China Sea, the Indian Navy ships were there. Because when somebody asked the chief of naval staff at that time that, will you go harm's way? He said, yes, if our economic interest is being hampered, that is our charter, that wherever economic interest may be. But coming back to that, you mentioned the encirclement of the western powers, so to say. Let's not forget that we are talking about, there are countries of two different ideologies. India is a democratic country, and all those countries that you mentioned, the island states, they are all democracies. And therefore, there is hardly a question of, democracy and two democracies sort of trying to fight with each other, because they will always try and solve it by talking. But here we are talking about China, which is an expansionist country. It is a different ideology. And everything that it does, it may look very innocent and very commercial in the beginning, but they all of dual use decisions. And we also see that, okay, they have already shown the nature of salami slicing, as we call it, over the Himalayas. They have armed our Western neighbor, who's not our friend by any standard. They have armed them to the teeth, and all their weapon systems of the Western neighbor are pointing towards our country. So therefore, the intentions and ideology is very clear. And that is the reason that I would say that when it comes to our, right in the beginning, that is the charter of the Indian Navy, to safeguard the economic interest, protect the energy sea lanes of communication. That is the first charter and the biggest charter. And it's not very small. We are talking about sea lanes of communication, starting from the South American coast to India, Gulf to India. Then that seems like a very short distance, actually, when you see, African coast to Indian, or if you see from Indonesia to Indian East Coast. Our encirclement by China is a truth. It's a reality. Other countries who are here, they are here because we are together. They are here so that they can stand up to you if required. But I would say now the Navy has come to a stature that is the Indian Navy, which will stand up to the requirements of the other democratic countries which are present in the Indian Ocean. It's just the other way around. And therefore, we have this 2+2 exchanges. It doesn't happen on its own. 2+2 is a very high level of interaction. And we have 2+2 with so many countries now, all the major countries. We exchange information, we exchange intelligence, we give support on the, RNR, as they call it, rest and recuperate, and fueling of their ships and submarine. It's like your own friend's port. So we have no issue. We operate from Diego Garcia. We operate from Reunion. We have been operating for quite some time now. So the point is that there is complete openness. There is no opaqueness. Whereas in the other system, everything is opaque. They will come to a place as an economic activity, and thereafter you'll find that poor country has become bloody bankrupt. You look at Sri Lanka, you look at Pakistan. So is the whole ideology so different, and it's so difficult to imagine that, in any day, India will have that influence ever. Unlikely, because Indian minds are very free. I mean, you're an Indian by birth. There's such a free mind. We have always exercised our strategic autonomy. Even now, as I said in the beginning, we will differ from US theory as far as continent is concerned. We will converge, complete convergence as far as oceans are concerned, because our concepts, our intentions, our understanding, our intentions are same. Whereas on land, it is not same, because at land borders, we see land borders and people in the north more from territorial integrity point of view as to how people have been helpful in the past or how they have not been helpful. So our vision is so much regional in continent. America is a superpower. America hasn't had any enemy on any of the land front, right? And therefore, you will find that they will have a much bigger global concept. So there will be differences. They will not be diverging. They will not be converging. They will only be on divergence. Which the US administration now understands all that. That is why they have allowed you not put a sanction. You can trade for oil with Russia. You can trade with Iran. Chabahar port has been kept out of the ambit of US sanctions. So America understands all this. So I think we are in a much better position, and we have made them understand not by sort of power of the gun. We have had a negotiation. We have had a data being fed. So, that is the benefit between the democratic countries, the oldest and the largest democracy. This is the benefit. So I don't think that, there is any question of any encirclement, because they're all partners now, economic partners, military partners. How can you have any encirclement in that case? Encirclement, the other one, yes, mainly because on the land border, they have shown their intention. They have shown their intention in the kind of friends they have, and otherwise they don't have any friends. Why not? Why is India has got so many friends? So that whole ideology of, as we say, Vasudha Kutumbakam, it is being practiced. There's no doubt about that.
So one last question on this one. American social studies, American strategic studies, I have a lot of material from the American universities, and I'm going to quote material American universities here. And American universities, there's one famous diplomat. He said, "To be a friend of America is dangerous, but to be a friend of America is dangerous. Sorry, to be an enemy of America is dangerous, but to be a friend of America is fatal." Okay, that's what he said. And most of the wars in the world today, if you look at the history, right, Bosnia, Herzegovina, Yugoslavia, we all know what happened there, is democracies versus democracies. And America has been known to replace a democracy with a dictator. We have known that in Egypt, Libya, many places where and even the recent fight in Ukraine, Russia is democracies. Russia and Ukraine both are democracies. So just being democracy is not a friendly credential in any way. Secondly, the facts on the ground are different. If you look at the strategic options, that recently, 2 years back or 3 years back, in a US Navy ship entered into Indian waters near Lakshadweep, and which was a big thing for Indian media, which was reported in the big Indian media. I don't know the facts of the case. I don't know, and I don't need to know also.
No, I will tell you. I will tell you the facts.
And being democracy is like the West has economic interests. Like Chanakya says, nations have interests. Nations don't have friendships. So because Navy has to ultimately fight with an enemy, and it can be anyone. It can be a previous friendly state also. So how do you see the global phenomena of democracies versus democracies? And even though India is, according to Prime Minister Modi, the mother of all democracies, and I have corroborated the fact that Satyavati, the mother of Vyasdev, when there was no heir to the Kurukshetra Hastinapur kingdom, she talks about Lokatantra through Bhishma. And so it is a 7,005, whenever Mahabharata was written, that reference is there, that Loktantra was being practiced even at that time. Even in Valmiki Ramayana, Loktantra is mentioned by Dashrath Maharaj in a different way. It was because different yoga, different way it is explained. So just being a democracy, is it enough to secure the interest, or we need to have the cutting edge and the fighting capacity to thwart any misadventure, whether by friendly or an enemy state?
Well, again, it's a very, I would say, philosophical question, really. I'll tell you why. Uh, you know, the state relationships depend on many aspects. And I would say that the uh, two very important levers of state power, a power of a state has got two levers. One is economy, and other one is military. There's hardly any third power, really. Of course, there is one power called soft power, but my view on soft power is quite different, and we can talk about it if there is time. Um, you know, you may be right in many ways, but the independent thinking of the Indian polity gives it a very unique position, that while we can have difference of opinion, even with America, as I mentioned, with the West, but we know how to manage these differences rather than getting into a conflict. Because I know that economically and militarily, India is not the world power. It may become world power one day, but right now it is not. And therefore, the differences must be managed. The divergence must be brought to converge. There must be some points where we can talk, get the closeness, and which may, they say like the Chinese saying, that if you can't solve it, leave it for the next generation. But we don't leave it for that long. We try. We try to see if we can, bring those divergences to reduce the divergences and bring it to a path of convergence so that we don't come into any armed conflict. So this is one basic dictum that the Indian polity has followed, irrespective of which power, which party is in power. You have seen Prime Minister Modi's own foreign policy. You have seen his own way, the manner in which he meets people, the heads of state, and today he is the most popular, world leader by any sort of mathematics. Why has it happened? It has happened because he is very practical as far as practicing the democracy is concerned. You gave some names, of democracy, but you and I know that some democracies in that you named are sham democracies. They are named as democracy. They show democratic culture. They have, but they are far from being a real open democracies like America is, or like the Western countries are, or maybe as India is. Where people's voice has power. For example, in America, people have power. It is not the president. And the most powerful are the people. You can see that every day. Even if the president wants a new law to be enacted, it better have the sanction of the House and also the Senate. And his own party people might just vote against his proposal. So it is not that democracies will not have differences. Within home, there will be differences, and that is what democracy is all about. Inside home, yes, but when it comes to you're dealing with other countries, the entire country is united. It is one, and therefore, when some of our politicians go outside and make certain comments about the country, to my mind, it is not in good taste. As a country, after all, the prime minister is that of a country. He is not prime minister of a particular political party. So I think I look at it this way, that yes, what you're saying is right. That by itself, by democracies will not fight. A true democracy are to my mind, whatever study that I have done, uh, that true democracies will try and bring their differences, divergences, to narrow down so that there is no armed conflict. It can be avoided. But if you don't talk, if you don't make an attempt, Serbia will happen, Ukraine will happen, many more will happen. If America has made use of that, again, it's an ideological difference. Whereas we have kept away. India has been a non-aligned country during the Cold War days. We said, sorry, we are not part of any of these. So that time the prime minister and the politicians saw a point in this, that we are too poor to get involved. We'll get absolutely rummaged. As a poor country, we are a poor country. Now, of course, every time the people are getting lifted out of poverty, but that is a subsequent event. But during the period of Cold War, where the US is being blamed, or maybe US is so allegedly has created war in many countries, it must be a weakness of the smaller state, that you tend to take sides. If you take sides, and the side that you have taken, when and that leader is not having a good time, then you get rammed by the other party. So we have, even now, our strategic autonomy, as you rightly said, we are not alliance, we are partners, and we can have differences. And I mentioned to you, I gave you two examples of recent examples. For example, the other day, the German minister, somebody who came for G20, he made some statement about, India has not taken a firm stand on, Ukraine. He has been rebutted by a foreign office. He said, you have no business to be talking about this. We have a very firm stand, and our stand is that please stop for bringing peace. That is our position. By only criticizing, and they have also gone to the stage of saying that what happens to, why are you fueling the fire? Why are you giving so much of weapon systems to the Ukrainians? For what? You don't, just because we don't take your side, it means that we are on the wrong path, is it? Our foreign minister made a statement, that the problem of West is world's problem, and my problem is nobody's problem, is it? And he said it here in the US, if I'm not wrong.
That's right.
So I think it's a very
In
Indian.
Europe, he said. In
Europe,
Europe.
in Indian mind is quite clear. Defense minister or foreign minister, prime minister, they speak like any other Indian would. Because the mindset, genetically we are all Indians. We grew up in the same usi mitti ka khana khaya, and we have eaten the same grain from the same land. So I think that while you are right, but that is a weakness of these countries who take sides depending upon the opportunity. And that is why at the moment there are ASEAN countries, majority of them, they're very careful. Though, economically they are intertwined. China is the largest trading partner of more than 120 countries, including US.
That's right.
Does it mean they are best of friends now?
Second largest trading partner in US.
Yeah, now second.
The first is Mexico.
Okay, so the point is that, there is so much more in the politics, so much more in the geopolitics, I would say. Because in geopolitics now, the geoeconomics plays a very important role.
Very important.
Depending upon whether you are a democracy or you are not a democracy. And that actually supports my argument that China is the largest trading partner of more than 120 countries. It doesn't mean that we accept that ideology. Sorry, you can never have single party rule. In our own homes, already two people don't agree. You're talking about two countries, impossible.
And that to 1.4 billion people.
Yeah, 1.4 billion people. And see, there are more than 200 political parties in the country. I can't imagine.
Americans have to get an idea that the chief minister of Uttar Pradesh is equivalent to the president of the United States from demography point of view.
Absolutely. Not only demography, and he is saying that he will make UP a 5 trillion economy.
That's right.
And he's heading in that direction, mind you.
Yes, definitely.
So it's okay. Yeah.
So thank you so much for coming on the show, and our audience loved it, and many Americans could understand the issues also. And also, our goal is to just bring out some points, and our goal is not to comment anything on politically, which we are strictly desist from as a channel. And my love is for the books. So please do read a lot of books available, and also follow retired Admiral Shekhar Sinha ji on shows. You can SHEKHAR SINHA. You can search him on YouTube, and you will see plenty of his videos on different forums across the world. And thank you for coming on the show. And it's an American show and based out of San Diego. Thank you for coming on the show, sir.
Thank you, Adi. And it's been great pleasure talking to you. And I hope that people people can reach out, as you say, through YouTube, or maybe I'll come on your shows more often.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You're very welcome. You're very welcome. I have lots of questions actually, but
Yeah.
our hour is on the top, and I've been told that just need to start winding up.
Yeah.
So do connect with us. Let us know your feedback. Like, share. Your comments are very valuable. Do comment on the show and let me know your feedback.
If
Namaste.
there are questions, Adi, I would, not now. You can pass it to me. You have my email, you have my WhatsApp, so you can always pass it to me, and I will be very happy to address as many as I can.
I combined all their questions in long, long questions. So I was doing that while the show was going on.
Okay.
But on the YouTube there'll be independent comments also. We will do that. Actually, one question came which was very starking. Will US and Indian Navy ever fight? This was the question came. I thought it relevant to ask on this forum. So on this show, maybe in the next show we can answer that question.
Well, one word answer is never.
Well, history says never.
Well, well, we can talk about it.
Thank you so much. And namaste. And thank you to all the viewers who are watching the show. Namaste.
Thank you, Adi.